everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell, and we are Bored of It. And today we're going to be doing a little comparison video for a few of our favourite racing games. So recently we've been really into this mini subgenre of board games, which is car racing games. So we thought we'd do a little mini buyer's guide, a little comparison video to try and help you decide which one might be for you, because they're all racing games, but they're all kind of have their own unique selling points. So we just thought this could be quite a fun video, and I particularly have been really enjoying these racing games lately. Yeah,
so we've gone through three of our favourites, and we have got Thunder Road Vendetta, which is for 2 to 4 players, or up to 5 with the expansions. And this is from Restoration Games, and it's a reprint of a 1980s kind of toy-tacular game. Then you have Joyride, which is a brand new game coming to Kickstarter this week, the week the video goes out, so it won't be available for a while, but it's something we really enjoyed, and we were sent the prototype by the publisher. That is for 2 to 4 players, or you can get a specifically 2-player version. Then we have Heat, which I'd be surprised if you hadn't heard of, because it's been one of the hottest games of the last year or two, consistently out of print. And this is for 1 to 6 players, likely more with yet unannounced expansion, because there's room in the box for it to go up to 8. And this is the most straightforward of the racing games. The other two are quite zany, with this being the most zany, this being somewhere in the middle of Heat and Thunder Road. You've got a lot of good racing, but also wacky items. So we'll go through each of them in turn and tell you a bit about them, where they differ, who they might be for, and let's get into it.
Okay, so first up we have Thunder Road Vendetta. This one is evoking for me Fast and Furious vibes. You say Mad Max, racing Mad Max.
Racing Mad Max.
So it's definitely the most antagonistic out of all three. So the whole point is to be slamming into your opponents, shoving them out the way, shoving them into the mountains, and basically it's about player elimination. So you are going to be kind of losing your cars and your vehicles, because essentially every player has 3, a small, a medium and a large vehicle. And you also have a chopper, which can just kaboom other people out of the track, basically. So it's dice management. You'll be rolling 4 dice every round, and then you assign the dice to each of the vehicles. And then there's an extra dice for a little special power that you can use. And the number on the dice will determine how far forward you can move that vehicle, essentially. But like I said, you're going to be slamming into other people. The track is quite chocked up, I would say. Even with 2 people, because each person has so many vehicles, it really does create the need to be hitting into other people. So yeah, chaotic, a lot of fun. It can be a little bit brutal, because you can get your cars eliminated quite easily, actually, but that also triggers the end of the game. So it's when somebody has to be eliminated, right, and then somebody has to be in like the final section or piece of track before the game can end. And if nobody gets eliminated, it just keeps going, actually, which is pretty interesting. But there's things on the track to kind of move around, obstacles,
different types of terrain,
like oil slicks and things that you have to manage. And what happens when you do smash into someone or they smash into you, that's also dice driven. So it could actually be that you smash into someone, but you're the one that ends up getting like thrown off the track, basically, because it's down to dice. So yeah, chaotic, fun, bit savage, great.
So that's coming back to the savageness. You know, if you want something that's really bombastic, big Kickstarter production, a lot of kind of plastic toys, the toy factor in this is incredible. You have choppers where you can like flick their little rotors around. The cars are very very characterful. You know, all the dice you're rolling for events and collisions, they're really big and chunky. There's a lot of good production in this, and we've started with this one also because it's the cheapest. It generally goes for around £42 is kind of what I've seen. So yeah, the big thing that I think will be divisive for everyone is do you want something with player elimination? And it's important to note that the elimination is the end-game trigger. As soon as someone's out, then, as Tali said, you're kind of on your last lap, you could say.
Yeah.
But obviously, it can be that for whatever reason, because people only have limited cars and they might be far away, and the back and forth nature, someone could sit out for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be for everyone. It hasn't been too much of a problem in our games, but I know people won't want that, and they won't want the antagonistic nature where the whole game is basically you trying to destroy other people's vehicles. Because if you sit behind them, you can shoot them. If you fly a copter in, you can shoot them. Like, there's hazards to drive over and they will damage your car. So it's also quite luck-based, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And more than the other two games, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think this one, for me, it just really evokes the vibe of it. I can imagine in my head, like Fast and Furious, like with the flags and like the glamorous women doing like this at the beginning, like street racing.
Yeah.
So for me, it really, I imagine like Fast and Furious soundtrack in my head when we're
but
playing
with
it.
all the cars having rocket launchers attached to them rather than nitro.
Yeah, but it's just that kind of chaos vibe, and I personally love it.
Yeah, I mean, if you love just having a laugh and chucking a bunch of dice, then this is going to be the one for you. I think it's unfortunately probably the one with the least replayability, though, out of the three, just because you basically are just getting, I think you get 5 kind of boards and you put 3 together to make it, and because it's kind of like unlimited, and they're all double-sided as well, but they are the same size with like, there's not so much difference really between them besides the layout. And there's not a lot that's going to change from game to game. So, whether you have a kind of random variation of these tiles coming out, it's not that different. Yeah. So it'll probably be the quickest to maybe become a bit bored of.
I don't know. I know what you mean, because it's not different every game. But for me, the chaos and like almost how you can imagine the story would keep it fresh. And also I think it's not that deep, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
that's
just
important.
A bit of fun. Some of the games we do feel like go on a little bit too long, like overstays its welcome just a little bit, considering that it is this kind of fun chaos game. But that said, I mean, it's not that long, right? So
I think, well, it's debatable, right? If it's only long when it overstays its welcome, otherwise,
yeah. But I just think for me, it doesn't matter that it's not changing every time, because the fun of it is playing the game rather than discovering more and more every time, because it's just not that type of thing.
Yeah. I've heard that we don't have any of the expansions, and I've heard that they go a long way towards making it more interesting and maybe replayable in the sense that I'm talking about. So, but they're very hard to get hold of. And also I think at the moment, this is also relatively hard to get hold of, but I think there's going to be potentially reprints in the future and maybe a new Kickstarter for it. But yeah, so that's one. It's the cheapest to get the base game, but maybe if you do want all of the replayability that you can get, you need to then spring for the expansion. So you can balance that.
I was surprised that you said it was the cheapest, because when you break it down, you said like there isn't that much to it, but how it looks on the table for me, like the value perception.
Yes, I agree.
I think is really good, just with the cars being obviously kind of a bit unique to like the player colours, and it feels like kind of weighty production to me. Yeah. So I was quite surprised at that. Yeah. So I think it's like pretty good value.
Okay, so that was Thunder Road, and now let's move on to similar but not quite, Joyride. Next up, Joyride, Survival of the Fastest. And as we said, this was our prototype given to us by the publisher. It's going to be on Kickstarter this week, and it's for 2 to 4 players. What you can get is the copy we have here of Joyride, which 2 to 4 has 2 maps, double-sided board, and kind of items and different cars, different powers with each car. And you can also get a 2-player version, which is I think it's called maybe even Joyride Duel, where it's specifically the maps are a bit tighter, designed for 2 players. And then you can also kind of get an all-in, which gives you some extra maps. And it kind of leans, I think, if you get that into the more zany aspect. Because this is kind of turning a little bit away from just the pure chaos of Thunder Road to half chaos, half racing, but probably a little more on the racing side, probably 60-40 racing to chaos. And this is dice driven, but the dice only go between 1 and 3. So there's a bit less kind of luck and people can't, shoot ahead. Because that was maybe an issue with Thunder Road as well, that in terms of the race element, somebody could roll 3 1s on their round and someone could roll 3 6s, and then there's not really anything you can do about that.
Yeah, chopper then.
Chopper, yeah, that's true. Whereas here, obviously, you have a more limited and you have more control because you can lock some of the values at the beginning of your turn. So you have known values. Then if maybe you have a 1, you can re-roll it later in the turn. But it's hexagonally based, so the movement is quite important because you kind of get locked into straight lines and you can only turn maybe once, maybe twice in your turn. And you have to turn hexagonally. So there's a lot of kind of tactical awareness and strategy in how you're going to turn, the lines of driving you're going to have. But why don't you say a little bit about how the races work?
Yeah, so it's more like a Need for Speed. I was trying to compare it to maybe a video game or a movie or something, because it's basically checkpoint based. So everyone obviously starts at the starting line, and then you just have to go through and hit numbered checkpoints in order. But the route that you take is up to you as long as you're going through those checkpoints. And then it's usually 2 laps, but variations probably where you can do more of them. And yeah, so it's a lot more leaning into the racing side. You might end up having smashes with other players, and you can use that tactically, but you're also going to take on damage, which means that you limit yourself on your player board, how much control you have over certain things, basically. So definitely a lot more forecasting strategy coming through here rather than just pure chaos. When you go through the checkpoints as well, some of them will let you pick up some loot, which is some weapon or item that will help you, like nitro gas to make you go faster, or my personal favorite is the rocket. So that's where the chaos starts coming back in, but you would use those items and you would use smashing into other people to get ahead. I guess you do in Thunder Road as well, but the goal, it really isn't about player elimination. You just need to get in front of the other players so that you can get through the checkpoints and complete the laps the fastest.
There's also no player elimination either. I think if you take too much damage, you're just really restricted in what you can do. But it's quite a clever system. I think some of the things we've liked about this is it's very Mario Kart-esque. So there's a nice balance of chaos to racing. So if you do want a bit of zany racing, but you want racing to be the main aspect, this is quite nice for that. And I think we've been quite impressed by how in every game we've played, at some point someone's been quite far behind and they've always managed to get back in it. I mean, in our last game, the person in last place, she was facing backwards half the map away from me, and she managed to win that game. Yeah. And that's kind of a lot of what we've seen. So I quite enjoy that.
Definitely have some more control here versus Thunder Road about your destiny, right?
Yeah.
Although, of course, there is an element of player interaction where people can come and just ruin your plans. But a lot more of it is just within your control, basically. I do think this could be playable with young children, maybe, and like family. But like we said, because there is a lot more strategy here and you have to forecast how you're going to be able to turn because it's quite limited, maybe... Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of easy to accidentally end up crashing into a wall if you're not too careful.
Definitely your first game.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Thunder Road's just like all out.
Yeah, and I guess you move in a straight line, so it's easier, right? You don't have to worry about turning.
Hex turning, yeah.
I think one thing that's going to be really great about this, so this, I think, version we have here is going to go for £50 on Kickstarter. And one thing that's great is it comes with double-sided map, basically. One's called One's called Junkyard, the other's called Overpass. And what's great, because of this checkpoint system, the rules are going to come with pre-map setups, because there's kind of obstacle tokens that you put on the map to rearrange it. The checkpoints can go in different places. So although you only have 2 maps, you could argue, you actually have a lot more because of how the setup works and the checkpoints go, because it changes, obviously, racing, much like how in a video game like Need for Speed, where they have maybe an open city and they change where it is, the checkpoints go to change the race, even though it's the same map. So that's quite cool. And I think it gives you the ability to make your own. And you can also definitely, I mean, people are going to be making their own and uploading them online. There could be a nice community with this. So I think that's quite cool, because you can get a lot of replayability, even though there aren't necessarily a lot of different maps, components in the box.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think that's Joyride. Obviously, big caveat that it's not a final version. The rules are almost entirely there. I think they're pretty much final. I think what's going to be added is maybe some new items into each different box. So they're a bit unique. Cool. Maybe some of the car powers, but the rules are there and we've really enjoyed our time with it.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the final game, Heat.
Okay, so then finally we have Heat, which for me is more like Gran Turismo style. So very much focused on the racing here. There's no chaos elements at all. It's just about going around the circuit as fast as you can and getting to the finish line first, essentially. So this is hand management is driven by cards as to how far you can move. But you have to be a little bit careful with turning around the corners, because basically if you go too many or like too fast around the corners, then you're going to spin out. So you have to do some hand management and just be making sure that the value of the cards that you play to drive your car forward doesn't exceed a specific value on a certain corner. So the tighter the corner, the smaller that value will be. So let's just say it's 3. So you don't really want to be moving more than 3 spaces. Once you cross that line, you have to do like a check of how much value you have on the cards. You can do it. It's a little bit sometimes strategic. You know, maybe you do want to go a little bit faster and go over the line, but then you have to take a heat card essentially, which is basically a card that just blocks up your deck. You have 7 cards every round, and you do have quite a lot of control here, because you will be selecting the cards from the 7 up to 4. You have to give 4 gears, right?
Yes.
4.
Yeah. 4 is the max.
So the gear that you're in determines how many cards you play each time, because obviously the more cards you play, the further you can go. But you want to be in kind of first or second gear maybe when you're going around these corners, because you don't want to be shooting off around the corner and basically spinning out. So the least luck here, the more kind of straight line, just doing a race.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of, I wouldn't even call it player interaction, but you get something from the other players. For instance, if you're in last place, then you'll get a bonus. You maybe get to move a little bit further or take a heat card out of your hand, or you can slipstream and basically kind of go around other players. But it's not really, of course it's in your control, but you're not doing it to annoy people or anything like that. Yeah.
I mean, you can't really do anything to annoy people besides blocking them, but then you would never block them on purpose.
No.
Because you don't know where they're going to go, because you've already all picked your cards for the round, so it's almost luck where everyone ends up based on what they've played.
Yeah, and you want to go as far ahead as possible, right? So you wouldn't just sit there just to block someone because you're doing it at a detriment to yourself. Then it's just not really the spirit of the game.
So that's the thing. As you were saying, there's the least player interaction in this, but it's the most based on, like, the winner is of their own volition, basically, because there's a lot of hand management, tactical play, because for a lot of things you can kind of maybe be a bit dangerous or live on the edge, but you have to take heat cards, then they're going to come in and clog up your hand, and then you can only get rid of them by being in lower gears, which obviously you don't necessarily want. So there's kind of a nice balance and a nice rhythm to the game, and it's all card based, not a die roll in sight. Most straightforward, probably most, you could say, family friendly in some ways. Is the one I would most likely get out with non-gamers or family. It's kind of a a very polished, smooth experience. I like that you have that element of simultaneous play where everyone's kind of shifting up and down and selecting their cards at the same time, and then you just go in kind of race position order and reveal. And there's a lot of nice little elements. So one thing to say is this is the most expensive. I think it's going around £60, but it also arguably comes with the most in the box. So you get 2 double-sided game boards, each side having a map. So you get 4 different maps. You then also get a lot of different modules. I think there's 4 different ones. There's kind of a automated racer module, which you can use at any player count, but obviously it's best if you're at 1 or 2. Then there's kind of upgrade modules where you can make your cars a bit more asymmetric and kind of have different abilities, you could say, for the cars. There's a weather and road condition modules, which will add variety to the maps if you're getting a bit bored of them, because you have different weather, which affects how you start the decks set up at the start. And also different sections of the track will have different changes to them. So that's quite interesting. And then finally, there's a way to do like a championship, basically, where you kind of like race multiple times, you're getting points, you're adding in different cards, and it makes that kind of interesting that you can have like a long session, basically.
Yeah. It's probably the one, I don't know if you would agree, where if someone gets super far behind, then they're probably not going to catch up, right? I think it can happen, but because all you're doing is moving forward and going as fast as possible, that lack of chaos means that you could fall behind, I think, unless another player goes over the corner too fast and spins out. Maybe you have a chance of kind of catching up because they have to go back into first gear and kind of start from fresh again. But because it's just so straightforward, there's nothing you can do to like slow the players down, like shoot a rocket out in Joyride. So that could be a possibility. Although we'll say, because of also the lack of chaos, usually people are around the same position, right? So
I think just because of the way the deck kind of the cadence like going through the deck, people will have sometimes just have bad hands for the wrong moment. So it kind of goes over. But yeah, I agree with you that I think if you got really far behind, then you're just out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like you're going to get better cards suddenly, or like you would better rolls in the other games.
Yeah.
So this is if you just want a clean, family-friendly racing game where the focus is kind of on the racing and a bit more focus on skill. This is obviously extremely popular. It's now in the top 100 board games of all time, I think. It's also been quite out of print. We only got a copy because I saw it in stock at our local store, and then I was like, yeah, I'm going to snap that up. I thought it was completely sold out. Turns out it's in the Nordic languages because we live in the Nordics. So, but luckily it's actually pretty much language independence. So I just had to look up the rule books online every time we play.
Yeah, that's okay.
But this is also obviously a little bit out of print in some areas, but obviously, we also recommend this. Maybe the one that, I don't know, I think maybe you feel different, but the worst at the lower player counts.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we were talking a little bit about this before we started the video, but they all have certain elements which are pros or cons or whatever for lower player counts. I personally don't mind this at lower player counts because it is so singular. You're just moving forward. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit less interesting because there's less people to block you, there's less people to like slipstream and all things like that. But because it doesn't rely on the chaos of smashing into other people, it's just, you're quite inwardly focused, I would say.
No, I agree with that.
So for me, it doesn't matter too much for player count.
Yeah, I think just from my opinion, it's one that I'd rather play over the other two with people around the table. I think the bots run fine. They're very easy to run. I just think with a kind of racing game like this where the focus is on the racing, you have more fun with just other people
you want
being
more
there.
people to beat, basically.
Where with the zaniness of the other two, you kind of get that fun from the collisions or the racing or the,
Yeah, true.
Okay, so then we'll go to a quick final summary. In terms of our final thoughts, Obviously, we've kind of shown that if you want something chaotic and really zany, you want to go for Thunder Road. If you want something in the middle of that, up to straight racing, you want to go for Joyride. And if you just love clean, standard racing with a lot of different options on how to make the game interesting, then Heat is definitely a winner. Yeah, I mean, I love all these games in their own little ways.
Yes, but if you had to pick a favourite?
Yeah, it's really hard to say.
It's really hard.
I think it just depends on players, right?
Mood, yeah.
I think I would really like to see the expansions for Thunder Road and what they add.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Thunder Road if pushed, but only if it does play in like the right amount of time. Do you know what I mean? Because it can overstay its welcome. I just think it's more. There's maybe more laughter.
Yeah.
But I do think that Joyride has a lot of really sharp, like small little design elements that I really love and think interesting. I think the checkpoint whole system is really fun.
Yeah.
And then Heat, I do really enjoy, but it's one that I'd probably get out the least just because I would rather be playing it with maybe like 4 or 5 friends.
Yeah.
Whereas the others, I'd be happy to play with you a little bit more.
Yeah. Totally agree. It's really difficult to pick because they are obviously all car racing games, but they do something different, and what they do it really well. So very tricky to pick, but I think I would have to pick Thunder Road if I could only play one of them forever, ever again. Just because, like I said, it's the thematic, like the vibe, just really.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Fair. The toy factor as well.
In my head, it just comes alive from the board the most out of all of them.
No, I think it wins on toy factor as well, and just like table presence.
Yes,
100%.
Yeah.
Because it's factor.
Yeah.
So we hope this was helpful, and we're going to flash up a list of some other games that we haven't personally played, but that can be talked about in the same breath. And I know that these were games which were talked about when this was demonstrated at Gen Con, other racing games in a similar genre. So hopefully, if you are not happy with these suggestions, you can look into those. But we really hope that this little mini comparison bias guide was helpful. Please ask us any questions about these games, and we really appreciate you watching. So please consider subscribing if it was helpful, because it helps to grow the channel. But thanks for your time, and see you.